3 months ago, my wife cried in my arms after we discovered we'd won $200 million. She kissed me, called me her blessing, told me we'd finally made it. 6 weeks later, she was sitting across from me in divorce court, trying to convince a judge that the winning lottery ticket belonged to her. The craziest part? She thought I was powerless the entire time. She humiliated me online, turned friends against me, called me controlling, manipulated the public narrative. But while everyone was busy laughing at me, they didn't know I had already prepared for this months earlier, because the original ticket, the signed one worth $200 million, was legally registered in my name before she ever changed. Atlanta looked beautiful from the 38th floor, especially at night. The highways glowed like rivers of gold beneath the rain, and every glass tower in Buckhead reflected money, ambition, and secrets. My wife Naomi loved standing beside the window with a glass of wine in her hand, staring at the city like it belonged to her already. Back then, I thought we were happy. We had a luxury condo downtown, a black Range Rover, private dinner reservations, and enough money to live comfortably without checking prices. I owned a medical logistics company that worked with hospitals across Georgia. Naomi ran an interior design brand for wealthy athletes and influencers. From the outside, we looked like the perfect black power couple Atlanta loved to celebrate online. But success hides cracks better than poverty. I had spent years protecting Naomi from failure. When her first business collapsed, I refinanced one of my properties to help her start again. When payroll came due during slow months, I quietly transferred money without embarrassing her. I believed love meant sacrifice without keeping score. That was my first mistake. Because when people never see your sacrifices, they slowly begin to believe they succeeded alone. The Mega Millions ticket came from a gas station near Cascade Road on a rainy Tuesday evening. I stopped for coffee after a late client meeting near the airport. The cashier smiled and asked if I wanted to buy a little hope. I laughed and bought one ticket. But I did something most people never do. I signed the back immediately. Then I took pictures of the ticket, saved digital copies, and emailed them to my attorney. Years earlier, I had watched a former client lose almost everything after relatives and fake friends tried to challenge ownership of a winning ticket. Ever since then, I understood something important. Documentation protects peace. People think wealth changes lives. It does. But wealth without preparation destroys lives faster than poverty ever could. 3 months later, Naomi found the ticket inside my office safe. I was answering emails in the kitchen when I heard her voice upstairs. Marcus. Something about her tone made my chest tighten. I walked into my office and found her holding the envelope with trembling hands. Her eyes looked wide and hungry at the same time. These numbers? She whispered. I took the ticket carefully and checked them against the television screen. Every number matched. For a few seconds, the entire world disappeared. No city sounds, no traffic, no breathing. Just silence and a tiny piece of paper worth $200 million. Naomi screamed first. She wrapped her arms around me so tightly I could barely breathe. "Oh my God!" she cried. "We're rich." I told her we needed lawyers before telling anyone. I explained taxes, legal structures, trusts, anonymity laws, and why lottery winners should never expose themselves emotionally too quickly. Most people think winning money is the hard part. It isn't. Keeping it is. Studies show many lottery winners end up bankrupt because sudden wealth amplifies. Emotional weakness. People overspend. Family members appear asking for favors. Friends become investors. Strangers become advisors. Greed enters relationships quietly, then takes over completely. Naomi nodded while I spoke. But I could already see something changing behind her eyes. The next morning she asked me, "Legally, whose money is it?" I looked at her carefully. "That depends on documentation, ownership records, and marital property laws." Her expression shifted. "But you bought it while married," she said slowly. "Yes. So technically it belongs to both of us." I noticed she no longer said we. Now she said belongs. Within weeks, Naomi changed in ways small enough to deny but impossible to ignore. She spent hours scrolling luxury real estate online. She began hanging around wealthy women who treated marriage like business strategy. Women who called husbands assets instead of partners. One dinner changed everything. We were eating inside a private, rooftop restaurant in Midtown Atlanta, with 3 of her closest friends. Expensive music played softly while the skyline glowed behind glass walls. One of her friends raised a champagne glass. "To Naomi," she laughed. "The woman who finally hit billionaire status." Naomi smiled without correcting her. Another friend looked directly at me. "Marcus better stay humble now. Looks like Naomi became the provider." The table laughed again. I waited for Naomi to defend me. She never did. Instead, she leaned back calmly and said, "Marcus is still adjusting to the fact that I'm the lucky one now." Something cold moved through my chest. Humiliation does not always happen through screaming. Sometimes it arrives smiling, dressed in silk. While strangers laugh at your pain over candlelight. That night, while driving home through downtown Atlanta, Naomi stared out the passenger window and quietly said something I will never forget. "You know, people are already saying I deserve more control over the money." I tightened my grip on the steering wheel. "What people?" "My friends, my family, even online. They think you're acting secretive. I'm protecting us." "No," she replied softly. "You're protecting yourself." That sentence changed our marriage. Suddenly, every conversation became about ownership. Naomi wanted access to my safe, my lawyer, my financial records, and the original ticket itself. When I refused, explaining that legal protection mattered for both of us, she accused me of trying to manipulate her. She began posting cryptic luxury photos online with captions about feminine power, elevation, and never letting a man control your future. Thousands of strangers praised her without understanding anything happening behind closed doors. And greed is dangerous because it rarely feels evil when it begins. It feels justified. Soon Naomi stopped coming home regularly. She took calls privately. She changed passwords. She spoke to me like I was competition instead of family. One night she walked into my office while I reviewed documents with my attorney over video call. She looked directly at the safe. "Give me the ticket." "No." Her face hardened instantly. "You really think you can cut me out after everything I've done for you?" I almost laughed from disbelief. I had built the foundation under our entire life. Yet suddenly I was being treated like an obstacle standing between her and money. But anger is expensive during conflict. Emotional self-control matters more than pride. So I stayed calm, and that frustrated her even more. 3 weeks later, I heard the front doorbell ring early in the morning. A man in a gray suit stood outside holding an envelope. "Marcus Ellington?" he asked. "Yes." "You've been served." "Divorce papers." Naomi was requesting emergency financial protection orders, temporary control discussions regarding lottery assets, and public claims that I had emotionally manipulated her during the marriage. I sat alone in silence after reading every page. Then my phone vibrated. A message from Naomi appeared on the screen. "You should have handed me the ticket willingly." At that moment, she still believed the money had already made her powerful. What she didn't know was that I had already prepared for this months earlier. The internet destroyed me before the court ever had a chance. Within 48 hours after Naomi filed for divorce, social media had already decided who I was. Clips from her interviews spread across Atlanta gossip pages. Luxury blogs reposted pictures of her crying outside a lawyer's office. Influencers turned our marriage into relationship commentary. People who had never met me suddenly spoke about me like they knew my soul. Typical controlling husband. He couldn't handle her success. She stayed loyal until the money came. I learned something dangerous during those weeks. The public does not need evidence to hate you. They only need a story emotional enough to repeat. Meanwhile, Naomi became addicted to attention. She started dressing differently, louder, sharper. Every appearance felt intentional, like she was auditioning for a richer life. Designer heels, security escorts, black SUVs outside restaurants, expensive dinners with women who measured self-worth through status symbols and social media engagement. One afternoon, I saw a photo online of Naomi standing beside a white Bentley outside a luxury hotel in Buckhead. Her caption read, "Some people survive storms. Some people become them." Thousands of comments praised her strength. Nobody knew I had paid for the apartment she was staying in. That irony almost made me laugh. But pain changes shape after enough humiliation. Eventually, it stops feeling sharp and starts feeling heavy, like carrying wet concrete inside your chest. I stopped responding publicly. That decision saved me. My attorney, Daniel Price, warned me from the beginning. "Marcus, emotional people expose themselves. Calm people preserve themselves. He explained something most people never understand about divorce litigation. Courts pay attention to behavior patterns, angry texts, reckless spending, online harassment, emotional instability. Every reaction can become evidence. So while Naomi performed grief online, I stayed silent and organized documents. I gathered everything carefully. Bank records, the original gas station receipt, my time-stamped email to Daniel months before the winning numbers were announced, copies of the ticket stored in encrypted folders, lottery registration documents, surveillance requests from the gas station, financial transfer histories, insurance paperwork. Every piece mattered, because memory is emotional, documentation is factual, and courts trust facts more than feelings. At first, Naomi believed silence meant weakness. She started speaking to me through lawyers, even when simple conversations could have happened privately. Her legal team demanded temporary access to financial accounts, connected to the future lottery payout. They requested disclosure on every investment I owned. One filing even suggested I had intentionally created financial imbalance inside our marriage to maintain psychological control. That one hurt, because the truth was the opposite. I had spent years protecting Naomi from consequences. Every business mistake she made, I softened. Every debt I quietly absorbed. I thought shielding someone from hardship was love, but protection without boundaries creates entitlement. That was another lesson I learned too late. One evening, Daniel invited me to his office downtown after reviewing new filings from Naomi's attorneys. Rain hammered against the windows while Atlanta traffic glowed red beneath us. He slid the papers toward me slowly. "She's asking for temporary public restrictions," he said. "What does that mean?" "She wants the court to prevent you from making financial decisions involving the ticket until ownership disputes are resolved." I stared at him. "She thinks she can freeze me out completely?" Daniel leaned back calmly. "She thinks public pressure will force you into settlement before trial." That was when I finally understood Naomi's strategy. This was no longer emotional. It was psychological warfare. She wanted me exhausted, embarrassed, isolated, and pressured enough to surrender control voluntarily. Wealth changes people, but greed transforms relationships into negotiations. Every apology becomes strategy. Every conversation becomes leverage. The frightening part? Naomi probably believed she was justified. That's what makes manipulation dangerous. Manipulative people rarely see themselves as villains. They see themselves as victims reclaiming power. A week later, we attended our first private mediation meeting. The conference room overlooked Midtown Atlanta. Glass walls, gray carpets, artificial calm. Naomi walked in wearing cream designer clothing and diamond earrings. I had bought her during our 10th anniversary trip to Dubai. She barely looked at me. Her attorney spoke first. "Mrs. Ellington is prepared to negotiate a respectful division of marital assets." I almost smiled at the wording. Respectful. Nothing about the last month had been respectful. Then the lawyer continued. "Provided Mr. Ellington agrees to transfer immediate joint authority over all lottery-related financial structures." There it was. The real target. Not healing, not fairness. Control. I folded my hands carefully. "And if I don't?" Naomi answered before the attorney could speak. "Then this gets uglier." Her voice sounded cold, but I noticed something else underneath it. Fear. That surprised me. Until I realized greed and fear often grow together. The more people worship money, the more terrified they become of losing access to it. I looked directly at her for the first time in weeks. "Naomi," I said quietly, "you already had a beautiful life before this." She laughed bitterly. "No, Marcus. We had your version of a beautiful life." That sentence stayed with me afterward. Because sometimes relationships fail long before betrayal becomes visible. Sometimes resentment builds silently beneath comfort. One partner sacrifices quietly while the other slowly feels emotionally. Dependent, smaller, controlled, or unseen. Money had not created every crack in our marriage. It had exposed them under brighter light. Still, nothing justified what came next. Naomi began publicly implying that I was emotionally abusive. Never directly. Indirectly. Strategically, podcast interviews, social captions, carefully worded statements about surviving narcissistic financial control. People online ate it up instantly. The modern internet rewards emotional accusations faster than verified truth. Suddenly, strangers analyzed my facial expressions from old photos. Men I had mentored stopped calling. Business associates grew distant. One hospital client even postponed a contract renewal meeting until things settled publicly. That hurt more than the gossip, because reputational damage affects income, relationships, and mental health long before courts determine facts. One night I sat alone in the penthouse, staring at Atlanta's skyline while rain slid slowly down the windows. The city looked blurred and distant, like a memory fading in real time. My phone buzzed. A message from my younger brother. "You good?" I stared at the screen for almost a minute before answering. "No." That was the first honest thing I had admitted to anyone in weeks. Because dignity under humiliation does not mean pretending pain doesn't exist. Emotional intelligence means feeling anger without letting anger control your decisions. And I was angry, not because Naomi wanted money, because she was rewriting history. Then came the final blow. 3 days before our preliminary court hearing, Naomi appeared on a viral relationship podcast watched by millions across social media. The host asked carefully, "Do you feel like your husband changed after the lottery?" Naomi paused dramatically before answering. "No," she whispered. "I think the money revealed who he always was." The clip exploded overnight. By morning, my inbox was flooded with insults, threats, and messages calling me controlling, manipulative, insecure, abusive. I turned the phone face down on my kitchen counter and closed my eyes. Then Daniel called. "Marcus," he said calmly, "I need you downtown immediately." "What happened?" There was a long silence before he answered. "They made a mistake." I reached Daniel's office 20 minutes later with my heartbeat pounding, so hard it felt physical. Rain covered downtown Atlanta in silver reflections, and every traffic light looked blurred through the windshield. The city felt colder than usual. Not temperature cold, emotional cold, like the entire world had already decided I deserved whatever was happening to me. Daniel was standing beside the window when I entered. His tie was loosened, and legal documents covered the conference table. He looked at me carefully before speaking. Naomi's team submitted additional evidence. I stayed calm. "What kind of evidence?" He slid a tablet across the table. A video clip started playing. It was from one of Naomi's live stream interviews earlier that afternoon. She sat inside a luxury studio, wearing white silk while soft piano music played behind her. Her makeup was perfect. Her voice sounded controlled, vulnerable, dangerous. The host asked, "Did Marcus ever make you feel financially trapped?" Naomi lowered her eyes before answering quietly. "He controlled access to almost everything. Sometimes he'd remind me that without him, my business would have collapsed years ago." I closed my eyes slowly, because technically, I had said those things before. Not cruelly, not manipulatively, but during arguments over money, stress, and responsibility. Moments I thought were private. Moments she had apparently remembered perfectly. Daniel paused the video. "This is why emotional discipline matters during marriage," he said calmly. "People remember painful sentences forever, especially once money and resentment get involved." I sat down heavily. "You said they made a mistake." "They did." He opened another folder carefully. Inside were printed screenshots from Naomi's private Instagram account, not the public one. A hidden account used only for close friends. The captions were different there, much different. One post showed Naomi inside a jewelry store, holding a diamond bracelet while laughing, with Tasha and Brielle. Caption, "Once the court forces him to split everything, I'm disappearing for 6 months." Another read, "Men always panic when women learn leverage." Another, "He still thinks staying calm means he's winning." I stared at the pages silently, not because I felt shocked anymore, because betrayal eventually becomes exhausting instead of surprising. Daniel leaned forward. "These screenshots were sent anonymously this morning." "By who?" "No idea, but they matter." He explained that courts pay close attention to intent and conduct during divorce proceedings. Public manipulation, attempts to influence settlement through humiliation, or evidence suggesting strategic dishonesty could damage credibility, not always legally, but psychologically. Judges observe behavior carefully. Naomi had spent months shaping a public narrative where she looked emotionally wounded while portraying me as controlling and paranoid. But those private posts revealed something else entirely. Strategy, mockery, calculation. For the first time in weeks, I felt anger rise into my throat hard enough to taste it. Daniel noticed immediately. "Don't react emotionally now," he warned. This is where people destroy their own cases. One angry confrontation, one reckless message, one public outburst. That's all it takes. I nodded slowly. Because he was right. Emotional self-control is expensive, but losing control costs far more. The preliminary hearing took place 3 days later inside Fulton County Superior Court. I barely slept the night before. Not because I feared losing the money, because I hated what our marriage had become. People think betrayal happens instantly. It doesn't. Real betrayal happens slowly, through dozens of small choices, repeated until trust finally collapses under the weight of accumulated disrespect. Outside the courthouse, reporters crowded the sidewalks waiting for us. Cameras flashed the moment. Naomi stepped out of the black SUV. She wore a cream-colored designer coat with oversized sunglasses, even though the sky was gray. She looked expensive. She also looked terrified. Most people missed that part. But I knew Naomi well enough to notice the tension in her jaw whenever cameras moved. Too close. Inside the courtroom, everything felt unnaturally quiet. Lawyers whispered softly. Papers shuffled. Security guards stood near the walls, watching everyone with bored expressions. Naomi sat across from me beside her attorneys. For a moment, our eyes met. And suddenly I remembered our wedding day. Her smile walking down the aisle. Her hands shaking during our vows. The way she cried when we bought our first home together. That memory hurt more than the divorce itself. Because people don't mourn relationships only after death. Sometimes they mourn while the person is still sitting across from them. Court began sharply at 9 o'clock. Naomi's lead attorney stood first. Her voice sounded polished and controlled. Your Honor, Mrs. Ellington, believes the respondent intentionally structured lottery-related protections in ways designed to isolate and intimidate her. Intimidate. That word echoed through the room. The attorney continued describing me as financially dominant, emotionally distant, and strategically secretive. She argued that Naomi had been psychologically excluded from life-changing decisions affecting their marriage. Some of it sounded believable. That was the frightening part. Truth mixed with distortion becomes incredibly persuasive. Then Daniel stood. He spoke slower than the opposing counsel. Calmer, too. Responsible financial documentation is not abuse, he said clearly. It is protection, especially involving sudden wealth, where legal ownership disputes become extremely common. He explained how lottery winners are often advised to immediately sign tickets, photograph them, preserve receipts, consult attorneys, establish trusts, and limit public exposure. He explained that many winners lose fortunes because they act emotionally instead of strategically. The judge listened carefully. Then Naomi's attorney attacked directly. Mr. Ellington, she asked, did you ever tell your wife that her business survived because of your financial support? Yes. Did you control most major financial decisions? I handled most of them. Did you ever deny her access to the original ticket? Yes. The attorney turned dramatically toward the judge. There it is. But Daniel objected immediately. The judge allowed clarification. Daniel faced me calmly. Why did you deny access? Because ownership disputes involving lottery claims happen constantly. The original ticket is legally critical evidence. Did you hide the ticket's existence? No. Did you document ownership before conflict began? Yes. Did you inform your wife immediately after discovering the winning numbers? Yes. The courtroom became quiet again. Because facts change emotional momentum. Then Naomi unexpectedly requested permission to speak directly. Her attorney hesitated before agreeing. Naomi stood slowly. For the first time in months, her confidence looked fragile. I loved my husband, she began softly. But after the money came, everything changed. He stopped treating me like a partner. Tears formed in her eyes. Some people inside the courtroom shifted emotionally immediately, because vulnerability influences perception faster than evidence does. Naomi looked toward me. You know what hurt the most? She whispered. Watching him stay calm while my entire world collapsed. That sentence hit harder than I expected, because calmness can feel cruel to emotional people. But what she never understood was this. I stayed calm because panic destroys judgment, especially during legal conflict, especially around money, especially when everyone wants you emotionally unstable. Naomi continued speaking. He acts patient now because he thinks documentation makes him morally right. But paperwork doesn't erase emotional damage. The courtroom remained silent afterward. Even the judge looked thoughtful. And honestly, part of me agreed with her. I had protected assets carefully, but maybe I hadn't protected the marriage emotionally enough. That realization stayed inside my chest while attorneys continued, arguing over ownership structures, marital claims, financial disclosures, and temporary restrictions. Hours passed. Then Naomi's attorney finally made the mistake Daniel predicted. She pushed too hard. "Your Honor," she said confidently, "Mrs. Ellington believes the respondent is withholding critical evidence regarding the original ticket itself." Daniel slowly opened his briefcase. I watched Naomi's expression change instantly, because she finally understood. We had never been hiding. We had been waiting. Daniel removed a sealed evidence envelope and placed it carefully on the table. Inside it was the original ticket, signed, time-stamped, protected months before the marriage collapsed. And when the judge leaned forward to examine it, Naomi stopped breathing for almost 2 full seconds. The courtroom became so quiet that even the sound of paper moving felt loud. Naomi stared at the evidence envelope like it had personally betrayed her. Her attorneys immediately leaned toward each other, whispering urgently, but I noticed something important for the first time since the divorce began. Fear. Real fear. Not the polished emotional performance she used online. Not the carefully controlled sadness from interviews and podcasts. This was different. Her breathing became uneven. Her fingers tightened around the edge of the table hard enough to turn pale. Because deep down, Naomi had believed pressure would break me before evidence ever mattered. Daniel slid the envelope toward the judge carefully. Inside was everything. The original signed Mega Millions ticket. The time-stamped purchase receipt from Cascade Road. The registration confirmation. Filed under my legal name weeks before public announcement procedures even began. Digital backups. Attorney correspondence. Identity verification documents. Surveillance images from the gas station showing me purchasing the ticket alone. Every piece connected perfectly. The judge examined each document slowly without speaking. That silence lasted almost an entire minute. Then Naomi's lead attorney finally stood. "Your Honor," she began carefully, "while we acknowledge the ticket was purchased by Mr. Ellington, Georgia marital property law still requires evaluation regarding equitable distribution of assets acquired during the marriage." She was smart not to panic, because legally she was still partially correct. Marriage complicates ownership. A winning ticket purchased during marriage can sometimes become subject to division, depending on state law, financial structures, marital contributions, and how courts classify the asset. Emotional assumptions alone do not determine outcomes. Neither does social media sympathy. Documentation matters. Intent matters. Conduct matters. Preparation matters. And most people only learn that after it's too late. The judge nodded slightly before looking toward Naomi. "Mrs. Ellington," she said calmly, "did your husband ever deny purchasing the ticket himself?" Naomi swallowed before answering quietly. "No." "Did he disclose the existence of the ticket after discovering the winning numbers?" "Yes." "Did he attempt to secretly transfer ownership without your knowledge?" "No." Each answer weakened the narrative that had dominated public conversation for months. The judge turned another page carefully. Mr. Ellington documented ownership immediately upon purchase. He preserved copies, contacted legal counsel, and secured the asset before conflict arose between the parties. Those actions reflect financial caution, not necessarily malicious concealment. Naomi lowered her eyes instantly, and suddenly I understood something painful. She never expected me to remain patient long enough for truth to catch up. Most people destroy themselves emotionally during humiliation. They scream online. They threaten. They expose private conversations. They react recklessly because pain demands immediate release. But emotional discipline creates strategic advantages, especially during conflict, especially during divorce, especially when money becomes involved. The judge continued, reviewing financial timelines while attorneys argued over marital asset, percentages, future tax obligations, trust structures, and legal claim procedures. But emotionally, the case had already changed. Naomi's attorney could no longer portray me as a paranoid husband, secretly stealing wealth from his wife. The evidence destroyed that image completely. And once credibility cracks inside a courtroom, everything becomes harder to defend afterward. The judge paused before speaking again. This court is not interested in punishing success. Emotional disappointment or marital resentment, she said firmly. It is interested in facts. Nobody moved. Nobody interrupted. Public narratives, she continued, do not replace evidence. Emotional accusations do not automatically establish financial misconduct, and sudden wealth often exposes relational instability that existed long before money arrived. That sentence hit Naomi harder than any legal argument. I could see it in her face. Because beneath all the luxury, interviews and social media performances, she knew the truth. The lottery did not destroy our marriage. It revealed what had already been quietly dying inside it. The judge ordered temporary protections over the lottery proceeds until final division negotiations concluded. But she denied Naomi's request for exclusive financial control immediately. Then she looked directly at both of us. I strongly advise both parties to minimize public discussion moving forward. Wealth without emotional maturity becomes dangerous very quickly. Dangerous. That word stayed in my head long after court recessed. Outside the courthouse, reporters crowded the steps aggressively. Cameras flashed non-stop the moment we exited through separate doors. Marcus, did you manipulate your wife financially? Naomi, are you losing control of the jackpot? Did the court confirm ownership? Questions exploded from every direction. Naomi stopped walking briefly. For 1 second, I thought she might continue fighting publicly. Instead, she looked toward me across the crowd, and I saw exhaustion. Not greed, not anger, exhaustion. Because maintaining false narratives eventually becomes emotionally expensive, even for the people creating them. Her publicist whispered urgently into her ear before guiding her toward the SUV, waiting nearby. But right before she entered the vehicle, Naomi looked at me again. This time without performance, without cameras in her expression, without manipulation, just sadness. Then she disappeared behind the tinted door. The black SUV pulled away slowly through flashing lights and rain-covered streets. I stood there silently while reporters continued shouting questions. Daniel touched my shoulder. You okay? I looked toward the Atlanta skyline glowing beyond the courthouse buildings. And honestly, I didn't feel victorious. That surprised me at first. After months of humiliation, public accusations, online hatred, and emotional warfare, I expected relief once the truth finally surfaced. Instead, I felt grief, because winning legally does not erase emotional loss. People think betrayal creates hatred. Sometimes it creates mourning instead. Over the next several weeks, public opinion slowly changed. Legal analysts online began discussing the importance of documentation, financial literacy, and asset protection during marriage. Clips from court hearings spread across social media explaining why lottery winners should immediately secure legal counsel and preserve ownership. Evidence carefully. Suddenly, the internet started calling me smart, but that word felt empty. Because intelligence without peace still feels lonely, Naomi disappeared from social media entirely after the hearing. Her luxury friends vanished too. No more champagne photos. No more empowerment captions. No more interviews about feminine power and financial freedom. Attention leaves faster than loyalty. That's another lesson sudden wealth teaches brutally. Months later, during final settlement negotiations, Naomi requested a private meeting before signing the last documents. We met inside a quiet restaurant overlooking downtown Atlanta. No cameras, no attorneys, no audience. She looked smaller somehow. Still beautiful, still elegant, but emotionally quieter than before. For several minutes, neither of us spoke. Finally, she whispered, I really thought you were trying to control me. I nodded slowly. And I probably made you feel that way sometimes. Her eyes filled with tears immediately. That honesty broke something inside both of us, because maturity means recognizing that relationships rarely collapse from one villain and one victim. Most failures grow from ego, silence, insecurity, resentment, poor communication, pride, and emotional wounds left untreated too long. Naomi looked down at her hands. I lost myself after the money, she admitted softly.